I look forward for your virtual tasting and for you to share your story with me.
Well, thanks for giving me the opportunity. It's really, really nice to officially meet you. So Medlock Ames is an organic vineyard and winery. We are in Sonoma County in the southernmost tip of the Alexander Valley, right where it meets the Russian River Valley.
Wow. We're
about 20 minutes from downtown Healdsburg, you know the area.
Yes.
And our vineyard is 55 acres. We grow 9 different grape varieties. And the entire ranch is about 340 acres. And
wow.
In addition to growing grapes, we also grow olive trees. We make our own olive oil. We have a giant organic garden. We make organic jams and preserves from different other fruits that we grow. And our story begins about 24 years ago. I was living in New York City, and my best friend and I did not know very much about wine, but we were just kind of having fun, swirling around a glass, trying to identify what flavors we could find in it. And I grew up on a farm. And so for me, it was really interesting, that connection between land and weather and how that affects the flavor of the wine in the glass. And it just, to this day, that still just astounds me, that how these subtle differences of soil or what's going on, how the vineyards farm, that has such a big impact on the wine. And one night we were drinking some wine, and we probably had too much, and we started getting those kind of crazy ideas. And one of them was that we could quit our jobs, move to California, and start making wine. And we were when the next day it still seemed like a good idea. And so within a couple months, I quit my job. I moved to California. I started studying winemaking at UC Davis. And then just every weekend, we'd look all over California. And we looked at about 100 different properties for sale before we found this old abandoned vineyard. And just right away, we knew it was just this perfect place for us. So we set about converting it to organic production, put a lot of compost and cover crops and just TLC into kind of reviving the land and doing a lot of remedial pruning to kind of revive these vines that had been kind of mistreated. And over the years, other neighboring parcels have become available. So we've grown from that original purchase to our current size, which is the ranch is 340 acres. And from the beginning, it was really important to us to farm organically. Having grown up on a farm, I've sort of seen different approaches to farming. And my family's been farming the same land for 7 generations. And so that's one type of sustainable. But then right after college, before I did this, I went into the Peace Corps, and I was working in Guatemala with farmers. And those people have been farming the same land for thousands of years. And so that, if the land doesn't work anymore, people can't live there. So they've figured out a way to farm sustainably. And so there was just such a great model that really kind of inspired me. But at the same time, in the past 50 or 75 years, there's been this introduction of kind of, modern commercial farming techniques, which require high inputs, fertilizers, pesticides, and this credit system that's really harmed people there. And so I knew that I didn't want to farm, dependent upon chemicals. So that was really another big influence for me. And I didn't know what all that meant at the time, but sort of as I, started farming, just trying to learn, I just sort of naturally gravitated to what's called organic.
So are you guys, I know everyone nowadays is labeled, organic, sustainable, so are you guys, is all your property at the vineyard, is it actually now like a certified organic, so forth through that process? Or is it just a couple of the things that you changed on maintaining your grounds that you guys consider because you're not using pesticides and so forth? Is that how it's maintained that you guys can call it that?
The entire 340 acre ranch is certified organic. And
oh, wow.
And in fact, organic, for many years was just sort of self-defined. But I think right around the turn of the century, there was it has a legal meaning. And so you have to be, in order to make a claim of being organic, you have to be certified by an agency that the U.S. Department of Agriculture has designated as being a certifying body. And it's not that difficult. I think, it's very, there's like an annual audit, and they just sort of, review our practices, come and do an inspection. It's most of the idea behind it is that you're not, you're building healthy soils. And so the main way we do that is by not, one way is by not using synthetic chemicals and fertilizers. But it goes much beyond that for me. And originally that was sort of my own philosophy. I just didn't want the people who I work with to be exposed to these chemicals. I wanted this land to be able to last for more than one generation. I didn't want to be exposed to them. I didn't want them to end up in in the glass for the consumer. But it was really kind of a personal decision. But just in the past couple of years, I've started rethinking my whole philosophy, and I'm starting to view it's not just for me and my company and my customers. It's really I'm viewing our place in the world and what the decisions I make on how we treat our land, how that affects global warming, really.
Right.
And so I'm really it's exciting to me to kind of think of us in this larger global context.
Well, I think obviously your upbringing coming from the farming, being so many generations, you really do care how it's impacting your final product, right, and your consumers. And that's if everyone actually keep that in mind when they were preparing their land, they would have totally different products. And that's what we obviously see. That's different values of quality of certain wines, right? It's just how people really go the extra mile. And you mentioned that you were in the Peace Corps. I mean, what triggered that for you to do that and actually go to Guatemala of all places?
Well, when I was 22, I just had this wanderlust. I just wanted to see the world. And I knew that just kind of traveling around, you'd only get this very cursory glimpse of it. And so by going and living in a community, I felt like I would, hopefully help in some way, but also just get to see in much more depth and detail another part of the world. And when you apply to the Peace Corps, you can request to go to a certain area or request not to go to a certain area. But I was just so eager. I just said, I'll just take the first opportunity. I just couldn't wait to jump in wherever. But it turns out that I couldn't have asked for a better place. It's just such a beautiful country, just such a rich cultural heritage. It was really a great experience for me.
It's good that you were able to take that and your farming upbringing and come into this idea of, after a long night of drinking, to say, hey, we're actually going to execute this, right? You're like, hey, remember about that talk we had last night when we were drinking? That's I love that follow-up, because I guess your passion really pushed you to do the next thing, until now you have an unbelievable product, right? And it really shows the quality of your product based on your passion. And I think that's the very key. A lot of people are like, oh, it's just, everyone says that. A lot of people could say that, but it's really reflected on the product. And I really think you guys really did it. And when it comes out to building such a great lineup and coming together with all your upbringing, right? That's really good. And so where's your partner now? Does he have a daily role?
Yeah, he lives in San Francisco, and he comes up to visit on the weekends. But he has a day job, so he has to focus on that.
That's good. But you get the other good job, right?
I get to. Yeah.
That's excellent. So tell me, I was very pleased with what you guys sent me. I really, I love big reds, and I was kind of shocked, because a lot of people, it feels like they're bringing back Merlot, right? Merlot, normally it was really good. couple like 10 years ago. Then it kind of got buried a little bit, and then all the different varietals, Blanc, everything got in front of it, right? And now I see a lot of vineyards bringing it back. So what triggered you to create your 2017 heritage?
Well, when we first found the vineyard in 1997, it was all Merlot. So that was just what the hand we were dealt. And at the time, Merlot was a super popular variety. So the first couple of years we sold grapes, and then we made our first wine. And the week that we released our wine, and I was taking it out into the market, bringing a bottle around to local restaurants and retailers. It was the week that this movie Sideways came out.
Oh, wow.
And that movie just destroyed Merlot. And it was just kind of comical that it was really tough sell. But I think actually it was a little bit of a blessing for the industry, or for the variety, because people pulled out a lot of marginal Merlot, that it was probably overplanted. Because it was a popular variety, people were planting it in the wrong places. And what people left behind were only the very best plantings. So I think it's a great value for a consumer. And I think the Merlot that you taste now is some of the best. And it's a noble variety. It's one of the most important varieties in Bordeaux for a reason. It's a wonderful wine.
And I was kind of curious, on your logo, what is the logo? What is the meaning of the logo?
So it has a couple of meanings. So when we sat down to try to figure out, what we wanted our logo to be, we wanted something that wouldn't look dated in 10 years. That was kind of our design focus. And we love kind of mid-century design. And there's a designer furniture couple named Ray and Charles Ames, and they designed this chair called the Ames chair. And 70 years later, it still looks so modern and clean and fresh. And so that was sort of our influence. And then so we wanted to capture two things. One is our landscape. So you can see the sloping, kind of the big shape at the bottom that represents our sloping terrain. We have a lot of steep hills, and then above that there's a little oval shaped. That's a pond, and then above that is the sun.
Got it.
And then it also represents wine swirling around in a glass. So it kind of captures that moment of anticipation right before you take your first sip.
You're right. Now that I just really sat down and look at them, it's so right. I've seen all your content on your site and your pictures, and you're right. You have the slopes, you have the pond, and so forth. So that it's pretty good integration of the logo. I love it, and I love the fact that, like you said, it's kind of the anticipation of your glass, right? Because it's a little see-through there. So
yeah, awesome. It's a cutout, so you can look into the wine.
That is really cool. I was wondering, what is it? I don't think it's a person. It's. I was thinking about the little circle. I'm like, it's got to be the sun. It got to be the moon. It could be anything that circle up there, right? So, all right. So it smells great. So what should I be expecting? So
this is a 2017 vintage. 2017 was one of the warmest years we've ever experienced at the vineyard. We had 10 days over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, a couple of days even over 110. And so because we're a pretty cool climate in general, we tend to benefit from a little extra heat. And so that kind of makes a lot of the fruit kind of really stand out more. So with this one, I find a lot of blackberry, blueberry, plum, and then there are kind of these undercurrents of this kind of floral and kind of toasty notes. And then in the background, there's this smell of new leather. It's reminds me of walking into a saddle shop. It's just everything has that kind of expensive leather smell that I love. And then on the palate, it's kind of this really bright acidity. Merlot tends to have more acid than Cabernet, and then this kind of mix of kind of mixed berry kind of bursting forth on the palate. And then it kind of fades into this sort of chocolatey finish.
It does. Oh, wow. It's so well balanced. And I still like that it has like a nice little dry finish. So it still has a nice dry finish, not just all sweet berries. And I'm picking up, like you said, that those leather hints, so that's what I love, those little notes that you said at the end. So right now, your production of this, are you guys going to be producing this also for 2021? What are you going to be releasing? Do you guys always have a line of Merlot?
Yes. Yeah, we've always had a Merlot. So we'll release the 18, I think, this year at sometime.
How much were you guys harmed in any way, any of your property with all the fires last year?
Yeah, last year we were okay. There were fires in Napa County, there were fires in the western part of Sonoma County, and we were kind of right in between, and the smoke never got to us. It was strange because usually the fires we get are much towards the tail end of harvest, but these were in August, nobody had harvested anything or only just a really small amount of fruit, and the fire just kind of the smoke just kind of hung around for a long time, and every single grower was concerned. And so the labs were overwhelmed with people sending in fruit samples to prove that you did not have, because wineries who buy fruit wouldn't buy it if the fruit tested positive. But we just got really lucky. We were kind of just far enough away from both of the big fires. It didn't hit us.
That was really good for you.
But in 2019, we did with the Kincaid fire swept through our ranch. So that was unfortunate.
How many acres did you guys lose to that?
Well, the fire kind of burned all of so we only, probably 80% of our ranch is not planted in grapevines. It's just sort of wild land. And the fire swept through there, and but it kind of really only skirted the edge of the vineyard. So we had to replace a lot of end posts and deer fence. And at first it looked like maybe 1 or 2% of the vines, but now having gone through a season, we can see that the fire didn't have any obvious burns on the fruit on the vines after the fire. But I think for certain parts of the vineyard, we're seeing more damage, and just the heat kind of cooked the inside parts of the wood. So it could be as much as 15% of our vineyard. So we're planning out. So we're going to do a big replanting this year and next year for the parts that were damaged.
So with that, in essence, with that smoke and fire that happened at that time, does that affect anything? The vines that were not burnt, was that affected? Is there an impact with all the smoke and the heat that could actually damage the other roots and so forth of the ones that were not damaged?
Well, the smoke would only damage that year's crop. And so when we saw the fire coming, we hurried to get everything harvested as quickly as we could. We had to leave behind, I think, about 30 tons of fruit that we knew would be too smoke damaged. So we had to kind of write that off. But then the smoke won't damage those vines in the future. But the heat, it looks like it is, it's causing some damage. So we're going to replant those areas of the vineyard.
So when you guys are replanting, do you guys, is it all new, or do you guys also do the grafting of certain plants when you guys are moving things around there?
Well, where the fire damage, we'll replant those.
All new.
But then there are other parts of the vineyard just unrelated to the fire that we, over the years, we've done a little bit of grafting. It's a great way to change the variety immediately, because normally to replant, you're out of production for 4 to 5 years, and then the first couple of years you really have a really tiny crop, so it takes a long time. It's really expensive. But if you just chop off the top and graft in a different variety, you can be up and running sometimes that same year, or if not the next year. And so we've identified certain places where we had a variety, one variety planted and it just was not appropriate for that spot. Like, for instance, Cabernet requires a fair amount of heat, and it requires kind of drier, well-drained soils. And so places we had where they were a little bit cooler or little bit, the soils didn't drain as well. We've budded that over to a different variety, and it's been really successful.
Wow. That's good. That's good to hear. Obviously in 2020, you guys are all direct to consumer, right? Do you guys actually sell in certain retail shops?
We, probably 95% direct to consumer, but just a few accounts, just because we have a relationship, or we just want to. It's important for us to have if there's a restaurant that we love, we just want to see our wine there. But for the most part, it's direct to consumer. That's
great. So do most of your customers go to the tasting room, or most of it just usually just a direct ship?
Well, this 2020 it was probably much more direct shipping.
Right.
We were shut down for significant parts of the year, and then even when we were open, it was very, very limited. And so it's mostly been direct through our club members.
So right now, I know that they lifted the ban, right? Are you guys going to open your tasting room again right now?
I think we're going to open it next weekend.
Okay.
It's funny, they opened it right before this polar vortex, and it's
well, that's happening. Yeah, we're supposed to have it. I think it comes through to tonight, right? I have one of our family members lives up in San Jose, and he's like, it's freezing and it's the rain and all this, and I guess it's coming down. We should have it either today or tonight. That's when we see that cold front and all that happening. But in Temecula wine country, we started seeing already some of the wineries opening up this weekend as well. Obviously, they have to have some type of food and so forth, but it's good. It's good. Hopefully, people are still following the rules and it doesn't bounce back and slap us in the face again, right? Because it becomes this whole yo-yo effect of things happening. Everyone's anticipating to prepare for it, and then suddenly somebody gets sick at one of the workers and one of your employees, and there you go again, right? So we obviously wish the best for everyone that's opening up, because it's obviously needed. Definitely there's a lot of people that do depend on the tastings locally, right, versus the direct shipping. So it's good that you guys have a really good model, that you guys have a direct to consumer, and versus just people always coming to your place to visit, which I'm looking forward to. Once everyone gets their vaccines, everyone is at par. I'm definitely going up there to go see your property. I think about 350 acres of just photography and drone footage that I could do there. I'm like, oh man. So that I'm looking forward to do that.
Yeah, I'm so I always thought of myself as an introvert, but I now I've come to realize I need interaction with humans.
Yeah, that's kind of like my daughter says, you're introvert, extrovert. She's all telling us what we all are, right? According to our characteristics. I think by default myself, I'm always like being alone. I prefer that. I like my quiet time. That's why I think photography, videography, it's always your single man type of things, right? That you can do yourself. But I'm obviously very social. I do like that aspect, but I think this being at home now, all the time without the choice of going out really makes you want to think, I really want to reevaluate that. I want to go out more and go see other people, because actually I think that's really key, right? We were meant to interact with others, and it's not the same when we're doing something through a video. It's just that conversation when you're having someone right across and enjoying a meal, having a drink, or just enjoying nature at all, right? So that's definitely, I think this is always a big lesson. I think I appreciate my wife even more now to a higher degree that I've ever had, just because she has to put up with us, right? I have a 19-year-old, my daughter's going to nursing school, my son's 15 years old, and I'm like, man, it's the amount of interaction that happens. And my son's, he eats like every 2 minutes. So he's like, I'm hungry. What's for lunch? What's for dinner? What's for breakfast? I was like, wow. I mean, this is amazing. I need to go kill a cow and just throwing him meat all the time so you can just fill him up. He's a vacuum. And he's at that stage that he's just growing and eating every 2 minutes. But now I'm just looking forward to, getting the vaccines and really being out there, and to really go out and support. And really, I already have everything lined up. I'm like, here's where I gotta go. This is what I'm gonna go next. But till that day comes, right? Because I think masking up is a good thing, but again, it's also gives you that possibility of something, right? I mean, of what something can happen or not. But at the end of the day, it's just how your comfort level is while you're with others, right? And especially because we have, we visited my wife's grandma, her mom, the kid's grandma and all that. I think we're just a little bit more conscientious about that. Or else, believe me, as soon as they lifted that, I'm like, I got my mask, I'm getting on my car, I'll see you guys later, right? But they still grounded me, unfortunately. So awesome. I really enjoy this. You know what? This is the first time I've also had your Merlot. The only thing that I think I've went through first was by default, the cab. I'm like, it's cab. That's got to be unbelievable, right? And this is really good. Obviously your story of being organic, the passion you put into it and your product, it really reflects on what you put out, which is amazing, simply amazing.
Thank you.
So when I was looking at your cab now, and this 50 tons, which is my wife's favorite, what else would I be expecting of this? While you're opening up yours there.
Well, it's the same vintage, so 2017, super, really warm vintage. And as I mentioned, I think our best vintages for reds are definitely the hotter years, like 2014, 2013, 2017. And I think 2020 was pretty warm as well.
Oh, yes.
So this wine gets its name. So it's called 50 Tons, and it gets its name from back in 1997 when we first found the vineyard. That was an El Nino winter, which is this phenomenon where there's heavy rainfall, and because of our steep slopes, that is a concern for erosion. And there are a lot of terraces on our vineyard, and because the previous owner had been trying to sell the land for several years, a lot of these terraces were collapsing. And so that first year we started farming it, we brought in 50 tons of rock, and my friend and I hand placed 50 tons of stone.
Wow.
My back still pays the price for that youthful indiscretion. But we make 3 different cabs. And so the 50 tons is definitely the biggest, boldest. We want it to be true to that name of 50 tons. It sort of has a more masculine feel compared to our, we have another cab that we call Kates and Bees, which is named after our wives. And it's a more feminine, sort of softer style of cab. But the 50 tons is bigger, bolder. It's 100% Cabernet, which is kind of rare for us. Mostly we blend other varieties into our Cabernet to help kind of take some of the edges off. But for the 50 tons, it's almost always 100% cab, something maybe 99, and we might add in like a little bit of Petit Bordeaux once in a while, but it's definitely that bigger style.
Wow. Yeah, it's a beautiful nose. You're right. Wow.
So this one, it's like I get lots of blackberry, blueberry, and cassis or blackcurrant. And then there's this background note of sea spray. So it sort of reminds me of being out of the Sonoma coast, which is very different from the Southern California beach. It's the same coastline, but in Sonoma County, it's just sort of rocky. It's very cold. You have to wear a sweater when you go to the coast. But that smell of the sea, just kind of, I love that smell. And I get a little faint hint of that, kind of a briny aroma.
Wow.
And then on the palate, there's lots of red fruit. Sort of the aroma is darker fruit, but it's kind of more red fruit on the palate. And then there's really silky tannins. It sort of kind of finishes with that super smooth tannin.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. It's like it's a complete, full body cab, and I think it's with that little twist of all those flavors that just linger in your palate, in your tongue. I love that. It's just really good. That's why I think when I saw it, I was like, okay, let's just try that one just because of the name. But I said 50 tons. Let's see if it's gonna hold its weight, right? I'm like, it's the 50 tons. Let's see what it is. And it was my wife's favorite, so I was like, that's awesome.
Oh, good.
And I think that's what the first bottle that she, it was practically her that drank it, not me, but to her, but she really enjoys it. She's not really a big wine drinker. She'll have like a glass, max two. And with this, I think she was just like, keep pouring. Where's another bottle? Is there another bottle? Can we have more? Because we're having this big dinner. And I was like, yeah, you really like that? I'm like, okay, good. Yeah, but I see it. I mean, it's an unbelievable bottle. Great. I could see how all the awards you guys are getting on this stuff is just pretty amazing. But expect it again. It's your process of what you do. So it really reflects on what you guys are doing out there. I just love the aromatics on this.
Yeah, I've learned so much over the past 20 plus years, just about how to farm, how to make the wine, and with Cabernet especially at our site, there's really it really wants to offer a lot of tannin. And so tannin is a good thing, but it needs to be managed, or else it can kind of overpower the wine. So that's sort of one of the things I'm proudest of in the past 10 years, is kind of refining how to make sure that those tannins are soft and round.
Yeah, they are. It's beautiful. And I'm seeing the reflection off my iPad, and I love the color with it. It looks beautiful, and it is what a full body cab is expected from Napa, right? Or that whole Northern California region. But do you feel that do you feel that you have to compete a lot with other wineries, because everyone always mentions, hey, I have the best Cabernet, it's better than everybody else's? Or do you feel that your product is to the standard that you want, and you don't care what whatever the other market is dictating, in essence, or higher expectations of it?
There's so many brands. I don't compare myself to them. I also think it's not just about points. I want to have the truest expression of our site,
right?
And nobody can duplicate our site if they don't. It's
right.
And I think every place is unique. I just judge myself based on what I think the potential was. Even if it scores well, if I don't think I did a good enough job, it's and I failed.
No, not at all. This is amazing. I just look at, there's so many, I look at all these different wineries, and they all have this unique product. All of them do, right? And it's so hard. I think for me, it's like the hardest when I would go to like a Costco, and you're there going, and I go, look at all the wine and really think about the wines, and what really stood up for me from the last time I've had that wine, right? What comes to mind first? It was, the acidity, the color, the tannin. What was that whole overall? That's what makes that whole judgment of what I'm going to buy next, right? And I think nowadays, I think the pandemic really created a lot of wine connoisseurs and a lot of wine enthusiasts, right? Because now everyone has this extra time, and they're just like, okay, I'll try this, I'll try that, and it created a really good buzz for people to really get to learn more about them, and not just buy, normally when you go to Costco, everyone's like, okay, or you go to Wine and More, or whatever store you go buy your wine at, you really don't hear the backstory of it, and you really don't see that. And I think nowadays brands are really taking into mind that it's good they really need to spend that extra mile of marketing, letting know their story, and people are willing to listen to it, right? And once they know your farming practices, your passion, how your upbringing, people are like, you know what, I could relate to Ames. I want to go buy and support his wine. And I think that really is making a difference nowadays with millennials being at that age of, they're one of our highest consumers of wine now, compared to where our baby boomers before were the wine, they were the purchasers of all what was going on. I think it's transitioning really cool to that point now, right? And like you said, your label is something that does not get old, right? It's something that's really cool. That's taking you to that next, it'll last a generation. You're like, that is really cool. And I love your reference to that piece of furniture and the company that does that, because it's modern. It's gonna have that forever. So I think it's cool the way you have that, and the way you're standing out, just because of your practices, right? And because I hear in Temecula wine country, when I speak with a couple of the winemakers, they're just like, we're never going to compete with a Napa wine, anything from Northern California. We'll stick to what we know. And I said, well, you're not really pushing yourself to the limit to create something, because I've tasted some really, really good cabs here in Temecula. And I'm like, but I guess it's just what people's expectations or what they really want to deliver at the end, right? Because I think the winemaker has to have that passion for it, to put it in, do the work that he needs to do to deliver an unbelievable product, right? And I think it's in you, man. I mean, you're just like, this is what I've been wanting to do. I come from these practices of farming, and I had this really cool idea one night, and you actually fulfilled it. A lot of people don't actually get to do that, right? And so the passion that you have between it, I think that's awesome, and that's why you have award-winning wines. So congratulations. I mean,
thanks so much.
Unbelievable.
I'm really blessed though. I think the Vineyard is incredible, and over many years I've tried different styles of farming. Always organic, but I've just farmed in different ways, pruned in different ways, had different approaches to the way I make the wine, and it has an influence. But I think the through line of there's something that's the same every year, despite kind of varying practices. So you can really taste what's true about the vineyard in each vintage, and that makes me a little bit irrelevant, because that's more important than what I can do. Right. But it also makes me just feel really good about the land, that's always expressing itself.
So are you one of those winemakers that normally in the morning, or you're walking through the vineyard, checking on your fruit, checking on your root stock, checking how everything is, or you're mostly your guys are out there taking care of everything, and then you go do the spot checks, or how do you see yourself in that role?
Oh yeah, it's so important to be out there in contact with the land, really kind of watch the day-to-day changes in the vines over the season, to kind of see how they're responding to more rainfall or the heat, and it's especially important as you get into the harvest window. That's sort of such a critical time to track, because it can quickly get from ripe to overripe. So you want to just be really on top of that.
Right. What's been one of your biggest obstacle in your journey to owning a vineyard and producing unbelievable wines?
My biggest obstacle, but it's just a function of my personality, is accepting things, not always pushing myself, or not always, expecting the highest. But I've learned a really important lesson. When we first, as neighboring parcels became available, we kind of expanded, and one of those parcels had some Chardonnay that had just been planted on it. And we weren't big Chardonnay fans. And we thought about just ripping it out, but it had just been planted the year before. And my heart said, we can't rip it out. Someone went to a lot of trouble. And so for several years, it was just okay. And we made a Chardonnay, but I just thought, maybe it's not perfect, but it's just what that site gives. And my cellar team said, I think we can make this better. And so I just did it at first just to humor them. I wanted them to feel like they had some input. So I said, okay, we'll try some different things. And we did. We went back, we tasted Chardonnays from all over the world. We tried a bunch of different production techniques, tried harvesting at different times, breaking up the harvest, and we churned it around. And it's now something that tastes so good. And so it makes me, I'm really glad that I listened to the people who are more in contact with the wine than I am. And because it just shows how important it is to listen to people.
That's true. I think, and that's good. I like to always ask that, because sometimes, it really does bring out that other side of us saying, well, the reason I lack in this is because, it's work in progress, right? Listening to others and their opinions. And it's cool how you brought something that you thought was kind of mediocre, but you're like, hey, I'll keep it there because someone went through this whole issue of planting and such laborious work to get it done. but you weren't expecting much of it, right? You're like, whatever, I'll just keep it just to not affect the grounds. But now you were able to turn that around and make it into a great quality product. So that's really good. I don't have that, so that I never got to taste.
Just take my word for it.
Yeah, I'll take your word for it. So that's great. And now, as we move on to your 2019 Sauvignon Blanc, and this says it is in Bell Mountain State. So that's not in your 350 acres.
Yeah. So everything we grow is on the same vineyard.
Okay.
It's all estate grown, so we don't buy any grapes.
Okay. In the what I forgot to ask you was on your Merlot and on your cab, is it French oak, American oak, or is it a mix of both?
It is the Merlot is all American oak.
Okay.
The 50 tons is 40% new oak, and of that 40% is American.
Wow. Okay. I always get asked that. That's what I like to know. I can never get enough of your 50 tons. I'm sorry, I got to finish it off.
So usually when I taste wine that's made in American oak, I can identify it right away. It has these two hallmarks. One, a good one, it's sort of can have this coconut aroma to it, which I think can be a positive. Right. But sometimes it can have a dill aroma, which I don't like.
Don't like, right.
But I can't, I think it's hard. I challenge people to identify that wine as American. And one of the reasons is we use barrels that have been aged for 4 years, and so that it leaches out some of those characteristics. And we do a heavy toast, so it kind of gives it this kind of espresso quality.
I saw that process from another vineyard. How they toast all their barrels and do that. That is, it looks awesome. Just all the work that goes into this. It's just amazing, right? For you to
barrel making. It's this ancient craft. It's a few thousand years old, and it's this. It's amazing. And there's a terroir to the oak trees, just like there is to the wine. Where in France or where in the world those trees are grown has a big influence on how fast they grow, which influences how loose or tight the grain is, and that influences how much oxygen migrates through the wood into the wine and impacts the aging of the wine. It's amazing. And if you taste the same wine from two different barrels, you can identify it right away, the difference.
Exactly. It will stand out individually, right? It holds its own when you do that. What normally I usually get asked, how is it that what brings out in the soil for you to get all these flavors of tobacco? Is it part of the barreling process when when they're doing all the work on the barrel and they're toasting the barrels from French oak to American oak, or is it also a combination of the soil, the compost, everything, all the minerals you put on the land that creates all these unbelievable flavors that you pick up on a glass of wine?
There are three different origins. One is the fruit, and that could also be influenced by where that fruit's grown, what grape variety, what temperature the fruit's grown in. Then there's another set of aromas that you get from the barrel, and then another one that you get from long aged wine, or the primary, secondary, and tertiary. So the secondary, the ones that you get from the barrel, are when you smell vanilla, or that's sort of the classic one, or the coconut or dill. Sometimes like a butterscotch aroma that comes from the barrel. But then for old Bordeaux, you sometimes get this kind of a soy sauce, almost like doesn't sound very appealing, but I could like blood almost, or that comes from just these over time. There's these new aromas develop in the bottle over 20 years. And then sometimes if the wine gets a little bit oxidized, it kind of adds this acetaldehyde, which is kind of the smell of sherry or nuts. And so that you get, that's from time in the barrel. But then like the basic aromas of like the fruits, those all come from the grapes themselves.
Got it. It's really good to get that information, because it's sometimes when you're sitting at a dinner table and everyone's like, everyone goes into what they're picking up, right? And it's like it's always a good topic to non-wine people, for us to say, what are you picking up, and what do you feel, and so forth, right? So that's awesome to how you broke that down. I love those three aspects of how you got that. Thank you for sharing that.
And then you asked specifically about compost. I don't know if that's going to impact the aroma directly. It might mean that the vine grows more vigorously, and that can, a vigorous vine can give you different aromas. There's more green growth, so sometimes you can get slightly greener aromas. So like the environmental impact of things in the area, like I'm not sure about those, but some people will believe that is. There's a famous cab called from Heights Cellars called Martha's Vineyard, and it has this one of the hallmarks is this eucalyptus smell to the wine. And there's eucalyptus trees that line one of the borders, and so people think that's getting into the fruit. I don't know if it's coming from there or some other pathway.
Yeah, and that's usually what it is, right? Everyone's like, and obviously when I go and I'm tasting with a couple of my Somm friends, they go in deep, right? Do you taste this and that? And I'm like, well, I never even went that deep. I'm like, I'm in first stage of what I pick up, right? And they're going into, and then I think they went on a tangent with the winemaker about malolactic, and they were like this and that. I was like, wow, I'm like, that's a big passion. How they, you hear them talk, and I love learning because I pick up so many good things always when I hang out with them. So it's always a constant learning, like you said, right? You never stop learning. You've been over 20 years in this business, and you're always picking up new ways and new processes of making your product better, and you taking from what you did in the past to make it better for your next vintage, right? So, which is great. I mean, this smells really good. I'm not really, a big Sauvignon Blanc fan, and I love the smell of this.
Yeah, I love Sauvignon Blanc. It's because it's so different. Depending on where you grow up. Like the Sauvignon Blanc from Marlborough, New Zealand, it's just, you can identify that right away. It's very different from white Bordeaux, which is different from California Sauvignon Blanc. It's interesting how it's changes so much from growing region to growing region.
So I get a lot of like an apple that comes out of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I get apple, I get pear, grapefruit. Mm-hmm. There's kind of this exotic flower aroma, and then a little bit of powdered sugar, confectioner's sugar.
See, so that's like the thing for me. How did you pick up this powdered sugar confection? It's like, I pick up the top layers, right? The apple, the pears. That's a pretty easy giveaway. But I mean, is it just your trained your palate that you go and you're like, man, do you taste that powdered sugar? Is that what you feel like? Is that something you get through time, or is it something that a regular person like myself could pick up in a tasting?
Yeah, well, it comes to me because I am tasting these. This is just one Sauvignon Blanc, but it's a blend of several different blocks in the vineyard. And then I'm tasting several Sauvignon Blancs side by side. And so I need sort of some quick clues to remember how this is different from another one. And so that, they all taste they all have like this grapefruit, apple, but the powdered sugar, that's a little bit different. So it helps me, it's just like a mnemonic device.
That's pretty cool. I love that. I was like, that's like a keyword for you, like powdered sugar. Or 2019 Sauvignon Blanc. I like that. That's something I can remember. See, I'm going to be able to use that now when I bring this to one of our lunches or dinners. I'm like, do you pick up that powdered sugar on the Sauvignon Blanc? Thank you, Ames. I'm going to use that line now. But it's really good. I think for a nice summer day for brunch, it's just great. Obviously, our weather now, we don't even know what season we're in half the time, because we'll get storms, and then we had snow like last week sometime up in the mountains, and Now we're, sunny 75 days, 75, 80. Now you have a storm coming again. So I guess you can never go wrong anymore with Sauvignon Blanc, right? Do you normally, is this all in steel tanks?
Yeah, this is 100% stainless steel. We make 2 Sauvignon Blancs. The other one is aged in barrels.
Okay.
Some oak barrels and some acacia barrels, which is a different species of wood. And so it's the same vine, same vineyard, but just a different way of treating it. And it's really different. It's really fun to kind of taste them side by side. And it tastes like that too. It has this kind of more buzz in it, and it's kind of got some lychee notes. Aromatically, it's a little bit, has this slightly more tropical sense than the stainless steel fermented.
Yeah, I've never had that. I mean, I've had obviously I know what acacia wood is, so that's what I was like. Wait a minute, that's a new thing. But like I said, it's actually, so it would change also. You said the color type of the wine. Yeah,
it's almost greener.
Wow.
And then it also has a little more peach, and it has more body. So this Sauvignon Blanc is really meant to be crisp and kind of linear, and then the other Sauvignon Blanc is a little bit rounder on the palate.
Okay, very nice. Well, I'll definitely have this. It's your favorite thing to pair the Sauvignon Blanc with?
Because it's kind of vibrant and bright, I think it pairs really well with fresh goat cheese, which has kind of a tang to it. Mm-hmm. And then I think it also goes well with kind of fresh green not fresh, cooked, but like asparagus or kind of those spring green vegetables.
Okay. I'll tell my...
And fish, obviously.
Fish, all right. No, I love the aromatics of it. It smells great. But being a novice wine drinker, I only pick up the first layer of notes. Pear and apple. But I'm going to use that powdered sugar thing now. So that's what you're going to know. I'm going to let my friends know I'm leveling up. What do you mean you don't pick up the sugar and so they're going to be like, what? Powdered sugar? What are you talking about? Have you never had powdered sugar taste on your wine? So good. So we're going to go to our last one already, your rosé. And you guys sent me your big Magnum bottle of that, which is really cool to get that. And this is also going to be my first time to try your rosé. So I'm looking forward to see what you expect from it. I mean, I like rosé. Rosé is obviously great as well. I mean, there's a lot of wineries here in Temecula that grow really good rosés. And I think it's like, I don't know if it's a big fad that people are just, is it a fad or is it actually a thing now? A lot of millennials were going for it. Have you tried this rosé? Everyone was on rosé mode. Do you see that for you guys, has it been a standard to always produce rosé, or is it just because of the demand of people asking?
Yeah, we've had it for 15 or 16 years. And when we started, it was really there's kind of 2 different ways to make rosé. One is called the saignée method, which is you're bleeding off some of the juice when you make a red wine. And then the other way, direct to press. And so for many years, we made it in the saignée method, which is really just a byproduct. It's you're draining off some of your juice from your Cabernet or Merlot to concentrate it. And rather than just pour that down the drain, which you could do, we would just bottle it. Okay. But what we realized is that by doing that method, we were over concentrating our red wines, which sounds like a good thing, but we didn't want to over concentrate the tannin. And so we stopped doing that method, but we still wanted to produce a rosé. So we switched over to the direct to press method. So we identified a few different blocks of Merlot, which was important because Merlot was like what I mentioned, it's an overplanted variety. It had been kind of a hard sell. So we decided to identify a few different blocks and just harvest them and press them. And from that point on, you treat it just like a white wine, but it has all the different.
All right. So let's see if you know from memory, what am I supposed to be picking up on the nose?
So the things that I find on it are like strawberry and watermelon. Those kind of pop out for me.
Yeah. I see the strawberry. I haven't picked up the watermelon yet. But you know what? It has those really light fruits, right? So it's not like, I think the Sauvignon Blanc, obviously you pick up immediately the aromatics of the pear and the apple. This, I could see that it just takes a little, swishing it around a little bit, and you were able to pick up the watermelon as well. So that's really good.
And then we harvest this earlier than the rest of our Merlot. So it has, because it's harvested earlier, it's got more acid. So that makes it really fresh and refreshing. But we want to kind of balance that acid a little bit. So we, towards the end of the fermentation, we start doing lees stirring, kind of similar to the way you would with Chardonnay. And that kind of builds in this layer of richness. And so that richness, kind of creaminess balances out the crispness of the young fruit acidity.
Got it.
No, so it's a great summer wine, but it's also a little bit more than that. It's not just like a light summer sipper. It's like, it stands up well. I think I love this wine at Thanksgiving. I think it goes really well with turkey.
Okay. Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't think about that. So out of your whole lineup that we shared so far here, what is normally like your go-to daily that you drink?
It's kind of depends on the season. So in the summer, definitely the Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay.
Are you talking about this lineup or my entire?
This lineup right now. I mean, this is what's out in the market right now, right? So.
Then the 50 tons, I like a lot, even though but it's it just depends on my mood.
It's got to be the mood, right? Like what?
Yeah.
Normally people always ask me, what do you drink every day? I'm like, first of all, I don't drink every day, but if I really wanted to, it's so difficult, right? It's just really, again, like you're thinking about, like, what am I pairing with what? And as a winemaker, outside from making your own amazing wines, what is a go-to non-Medlock brands that you usually have in your cellar?
One that I'm really enjoying right now it's a vineyard up in Oregon, Hopewell. And Mimi Castile is the winemaker there. I just really admire her approach and her understanding of like her vineyard and farming in a way that's respectful of the land, but also just the wines are really lively and beautiful.
So that's pretty cool that you're actually drinking an outer region wine. I would have thought you would be keeping it within region, but you're actually out of region. That's pretty neat. And what's a local region that something from California that usually it's your go-to when you're at a restaurant?
I'm very biased. I really love Sonoma County wines.
Okay.
But I really have to force myself to try other regions as well.
So what's your favorite from Sonoma County outside yours?
I really like Sutro Wines. It's another Alexander Valley producer.
Okay.
Alice Sutro makes some amazing Cab, Merlot, Sauvignon Blanc.
Very good. Thanks again for creating unbelievable product. I really, I think that's why, you have an unbelievable following of your product, because it's all hard, right? And a lot of hard work as well. So thanks again for your time.
Well, thank you for letting me share my story.